Ethan Parker, never believed one stupid joke could change his entire life. Not until the night he walked into the Grand Bell Hotel soaked in rain, and walked out thinking about a woman he couldn't forget. Chicago was drowning under a cold storm that Friday evening. Cars splashed water across crowded streets, while thunder rolled through the sky. Ethan adjusted the strap of his old camera bag and stared up at the massive luxury hotel in front of him. The Grand Bell Hotel, the kind of place where rich people spent more money on dinner than Ethan spent on rent. He sighed. Great, another night pretending I belong here. Ethan was 28 years old, broke most of the time, and surviving as a freelance photographer. Some months he earned enough to breathe comfortably. Other months he survived on instant noodles and coffee. Tonight's event was important. His best friend Noah had begged him to photograph. A private engagement party for one of Chicago's wealthiest business families. Ethan hated rich parties. Fake smiles, fake laughter, fake people. But rent was due in 3 days. So here he was. He pushed open the hotel doors, and immediately warm air wrapped around him. Crystal chandeliers glowed across the giant ballroom, while expensive music echoed softly through the crowd. Women in glittering dresses laughed beside businessmen, wearing watches worth more than Ethan's entire apartment. He muttered quietly, "I definitely don't belong here." "Then stop," looking terrified, Noah suddenly said beside him. Ethan jumped. "Noah, one day you're going to give me a heart attack." Noah laughed while fixing his tie. "You'll survive. Just take pictures and try not to flirt with rich women." Ethan smirked. "No promises." Noah rolled his eyes and disappeared into the crowd. Ethan lifted his camera and started working. Click, 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 click. Couples dancing, businessmen talking, waiters carrying champagne. Everything looked polished and perfect, and honestly, completely empty. Ethan walked backward while adjusting his camera lens. Big mistake, he suddenly crashed into someone. A champagne glass slipped from delicate fingers and shattered across the marble floor. Oh no! Ethan looked up quickly and forgot how to breathe. Standing in front of him was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Long dark curls rested softly over her shoulders. Her silver dress shimmered under the ballroom lights. But it wasn't the dress that froze him, it was her eyes. Warm brown eyes filled with sadness, hidden behind elegance. Ethan blinked. Words disappeared from his brain. The woman looked down at the broken glass. Then, surprisingly, she laughed softly. "It's okay," she said. Ethan finally remembered how speaking worked. "No, seriously, I'm so sorry. I have a dangerous relationship with gravity." That made her smile wider, and for some reason, Ethan felt proud of himself. "I'm Ethan," he said awkwardly. "Claire." Even her name sounded beautiful. Before Ethan could continue embarrassing himself, a cold voice interrupted them. "There you are." A tall man in a black designer suit approached them confidently. Everything about him screamed money and arrogance. The moment Claire saw him, her smile disappeared. Ethan noticed immediately. The man wrapped an arm possessively around Claire's waist. "People are waiting for us," he said coldly. Then his eyes shifted toward Ethan. "And who exactly are you?" Ethan sensed tension instantly. Claire looked uncomfortable, almost trapped. The ballroom suddenly felt smaller, and before Ethan could stop himself, his mouth betrayed him. He laughed casually and placed an arm around Claire's shoulder. "Relax, man," Ethan said. "She's my wife." Silence, absolute silence. Even the music suddenly felt distant. The rich guy stared at Ethan like he wanted to kill him. Claire's eyes widened in complete shock. Inside, Ethan's brain panic exploded. What did I just do? But before he could fix the situation, something unexpected happened. Claire stepped closer to him, very close. Close enough for Ethan to smell her perfume. Then her cheeks slowly turned pink, and in the softest whisper imaginable, she said, near his ear, I wish that were true. Ethan froze. His heart stopped functioning normally. For one dangerous second, the entire ballroom disappeared around him. All he could hear was her voice. I wish that were true. The rich man's jaw tightened angrily. This conversation isn't over, he snapped before walking away. Claire released a shaky breath the second he disappeared. Ethan stared at her. Okay, I definitely need an explanation now. Claire looked embarrassed. That was my ex-fiancé. Ethan blinked. Ex-fiancé. She nodded slowly. We were supposed to get married this year. Ethan looked toward the angry man disappearing across the ballroom. Then why did he look like he wanted to bury me alive? Claire gave a sad smile. Because he doesn't accept the word ex. Something painful flashed across her eyes. Ethan noticed immediately, and suddenly this beautiful stranger didn't seem elegant and untouchable anymore. She looked hurt. Human Claire crossed her arms quietly. He cheated on me 2 months before our wedding. Ethan's expression darkened. What? With my cousin? Ethan almost choked. You're kidding. I wish I were. For a moment, neither spoke. The noise of the party continued around them, but Ethan barely noticed it anymore. Claire looked down at the shattered champagne glass near their feet. My family still wants me to marry him anyway, she admitted softly. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. After he cheated on you, it's good for business. Ethan shook his head slowly. Rich people were insane. Claire looked at him nervously. Thank you for helping me back there. I didn't really help. I almost got myself murdered. That made her laugh again, and Ethan realized something terrifying. He wanted to hear that laugh forever. Claire looked at him carefully. You're different from the people here. Ethan smiled slightly. That's probably because I can't afford to be here. No, Claire whispered. You feel real. Those words hit Ethan harder than expected, because the truth was, Ethan hadn't felt important in a very long time. Not successful, not special, just another struggling guy trying to survive. Yet somehow, this incredible woman was looking at him like he mattered. Before Ethan could respond, someone called Claire's name from across the ballroom. Her expression fell again. I should go. Ethan suddenly felt disappointed, which was ridiculous. He'd known her for maybe 10 minutes. Still, he didn't want the moment to end. Claire hesitated before leaving. Then quietly she asked, Will you still be here tonight? Ethan smiled. Yeah. A soft smile appeared on her face. Good. Then she walked away into the crowd, and Ethan watched her disappear, completely unaware that his life had just changed forever. A few minutes later, Noah returned, carrying 2 drinks. You look traumatized, Noah said. Ethan grabbed the water instantly. I may have accidentally told a billionaire that his ex-fiancée is my wife. Noah nearly spit out his drink. You what? Ethan pointed toward Claire across the ballroom. Noah looked over, then his eyes widened. Oh no. What do you even know who that woman is? Ethan frowned. Claire. That's Claire Bennett. Ethan waited. Noah stared at him dramatically. The Bennett family owns half the luxury hotels in Chicago. Ethan almost dropped his camera. You're joking. I wish I were. Ethan looked across the ballroom again. Claire stood beside wealthy investors and politicians, smiling politely while cameras flashed around her. She looked like she belonged in another world, a world far above his, and yet she had whispered those words to him. I wish that were true for the rest of the night. Ethan couldn't focus properly. Everywhere he looked, he searched for Claire. Sometimes their eyes met across the ballroom, and every single time she smiled at him. Not the fake smile she gave everyone else, a real one. Hours later, the party finally ended. Guests slowly left the hotel while workers cleaned the ballroom. Ethan packed his camera equipment and headed toward the exit. But just as he reached the hotel doors, he turned around. Claire stood there alone. Her silver dress shimmered. Under the soft lights, for a second, neither moved. Then Claire stepped closer. "I'm glad you came tonight," she said quietly. Ethan smiled. "I'm glad I crashed into you." Claire laughed softly again. Then suddenly her expression became serious. "You know," she whispered, "that joke you made earlier, she's my wife." Claire nodded slowly. Ethan felt his heartbeat speeding up again. Claire looked into his eyes, and once more, she whispered, "I really wish that were true." Then, before Ethan could respond, she turned and walked away into the rainy Chicago night, leaving Ethan completely speechless and absolutely unable to forget her. Ethan Parker spent the entire night thinking about Claire Bennett, not sleeping, not resting, just lying awake in his tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, while her voice replayed inside his head, again and again. I really wish that were true. Every time he remembered those words, his heart reacted like an idiot. By morning, Ethan looked exhausted. His small apartment was a complete disaster. Camera equipment covered the table. Empty coffee cups sat near the couch, and clothes were piled in one corner, waiting to be washed. But Ethan barely noticed any of it. He opened his laptop and started editing photos from the engagement party. Click, photo after photo filled the screen. Rich guests, crystal chandeliers, fake smiles, and then Ethan stopped breathing for a second. One photo showed her standing alone near the ballroom window while rain poured outside behind her. She wasn't smiling in the picture. She looked lonely. Beautiful, but lonely. Ethan leaned back slowly. "What is wrong with me?" he muttered. A woman like Claire Bennett belonged in a completely different universe. Meanwhile, Ethan could barely pay rent. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Suddenly, his phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan frowned before answering. "Hello." A soft, familiar voice replied. Ethan. His heartbeat instantly betrayed him. "Claire." A small laugh came through the phone. "So you do remember me. Pretty hard to forget you." Silence. The kind that feels warm instead of awkward. Then Claire spoke again. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Trust me," Ethan said quickly. "You could never bother me." Claire laughed softly again, and somehow, hearing that sound inside his quiet apartment made the room feel less empty. "How did you get my number?" Ethan asked. "Noah gave it to me." Ethan smirked. "Traitor." Claire hesitated slightly before continuing. "I actually called because I need a favor." Ethan leaned back carefully. That sentence usually leads to chaos. It probably will. Now Ethan was definitely interested. "What kind of favor?" Claire took a breath. "My family is hosting a charity dinner tonight." "Okay, and after what happened at the hotel, everyone thinks you're my husband." Ethan covered his face instantly. "Oh my God. I know." Claire groaned softly. "It sounds insane. It sounds extremely insane. But..." Claire paused nervously. "Could you pretend for one more night?" Ethan blinked. "You want me to fake being your husband, only for dinner?" Ethan stood up and started pacing his apartment. This was crazy. Absolutely crazy. He should say no. A rich family dinner, filled with powerful people who already hated him. Terrible idea. But then, he remembered Claire's expression the night before, the sadness in her eyes. And without understanding why, he already knew his answer. "What time should I come?" Claire became quiet for a second. Then, softly, "You're saying yes. Looks like your fake husband is available tonight." Claire laughed with relief. "You may regret this decision. Too late now." After the call ended, Ethan stared at his reflection in the mirror. "What are you doing, man?" He honestly had no idea. That evening, Noah forced Ethan into one of his expensive suits. "You cannot meet billionaires looking homeless," Noah complained while fixing Ethan's tie. Ethan looked uncomfortable. "I feel like I'm attending my own funeral." "You look good," Noah said. "Try not to embarrass humanity. No promises." An hour later, Ethan stood outside the Bennett mansion, and suddenly the Grand Bell Hotel didn't seem impressive anymore. The mansion looked unreal. Massive white stone walls, huge golden gates, luxury cars lined across the driveway. Ethan stared upward. Yeah, definitely rich people territory. Before he could knock, the giant front door opened, and there she was, Claire Bennett, wearing a dark blue evening gown that made Ethan completely forget how language worked. Her hair rested softly over one shoulder, while silver earrings sparkled under the warm mansion lights. Claire noticed him staring, then slowly smiled. "What?" she teased softly. Ethan blinked. "You look illegal." Claire burst into laughter. Real laughter. Not polite, not fake. Real. And Ethan realized instantly he would do almost anything to hear that sound again. Claire stepped aside. "Come inside, before my family starts another war." Ethan entered carefully. The mansion interior looked more expensive than entire hotels. Large crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, while marble floors reflected golden light. Servants moved quietly through the hall, preparing dinner. Ethan suddenly became very aware of how cheap his life looked compared to hers. Claire seemed to notice his nervousness. So, without warning, she gently grabbed his hand, and immediately, Ethan relaxed. "You okay?" she whispered. "Not really." That made her smile. "Good. I'd be worried if you enjoyed this place." Before Ethan could reply, a cold female voice interrupted them. "So this is the husband." Claire's mother approached slowly. Elegant, beautiful, and terrifying. Her sharp eyes scanned Ethan from head to toe like she was inspecting something unpleasant. Claire straightened slightly. "Yes, mother. This is Ethan." Mrs. Bennett offered a fake smile. "How interesting." Ethan forced politeness. "Nice to meet you." Her expression clearly said otherwise. Then she looked directly at Claire. "Your father is already unhappy enough tonight. Try not to embarrass the family further." Claire's hand tightened around Ethan's slightly. Ethan noticed, and suddenly he understood something important. Claire wasn't comfortable here. This giant mansion wasn't really home. Dinner began 30 minutes later. The dining table looked enormous enough for a royal family. Politicians, business owners, investors. Everyone wore perfect smiles while secretly judging each other. And unfortunately, most of them were judging Ethan. He could feel it. One older businessman leaned toward another and whispered something while staring at Ethan's suit. Across the table, Claire's ex-fiancé, Adrian, sat silently watching him, like a predator, waiting patiently. Finally, Adrian smirked. "So Ethan," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "what exactly do you do?" Ethan calmly answered, "I'm a photographer." Adrian nodded mockingly. "How artistic." A few guests laughed quietly. Ethan remained silent. But before the awkwardness could continue, Claire suddenly spoke. "He's extremely talented." The entire table looked shocked, including Ethan. Claire looked directly at Adrian. At least Ethan built his career, honestly. The room became tense instantly. Adrian's smile faded slightly. Claire's father lowered his glass slowly, and Ethan stared at Claire in surprise. She was defending him, not because she had to, because she wanted to. Dinner somehow became even more uncomfortable after that. Still, every time Ethan looked at Claire, she gave him small, reassuring smiles. And strangely enough, that became enough. Later that night, Claire quietly escaped to the balcony outside the dining hall. Ethan followed her. Cold wind rushed across the city skyline, while distant traffic lights glowed below. Claire leaned against the balcony railing, and finally exhaled deeply. "I'm sorry about tonight." Ethan moved beside her. "You don't need to apologize." Claire laughed weakly. "You say that now. Wait until my family hires investigators to ruin your life." Ethan smirked. "Too late. My landlord already does that." Claire laughed again. Then, slowly, her smile faded. "My whole life, people only cared about my last name," she admitted quietly. Ethan listened carefully. They wanted connections. She looked down. Money. Then softer control. The wind moved gently through her hair. "For the first time in years," Claire whispered, "I feel calm around someone." Ethan's chest tightened. "You barely know me." Claire looked into his eyes. "I know enough." For one dangerous moment, neither moved. The city lights glowed around them, while silence wrapped softly between them. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat. Claire slowly stepped closer, very close, close enough for him to notice the nervous way she breathed. Then, suddenly, the balcony door slammed open. Adrian walked outside angrily. Claire instantly stepped away. Adrian glared at Ethan. "You think this little fake marriage act is funny?" Ethan crossed his arms. "I think your personality needs medical attention." Claire almost laughed, despite the tension. Adrian ignored her reaction. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he snapped at Ethan. "And you clearly have no idea how to let people move on," Ethan answered coldly. For a second, Adrian looked ready to punch him, but instead, he stepped closer and whispered dangerously, "You don't belong in her world." Then he walked away. Silence returned. Claire looked shaken. Ethan turned toward her gently. "Hey." She avoided eye contact. "He won't stop." Ethan stepped closer carefully. "You don't have to be afraid of him." Claire looked up slowly. For the first time that night, she looked vulnerable, small, human, not a billionaire heiress, just a woman tired of being controlled. Then, softly, almost painfully, she whispered again, "I really wish you were my husband." Ethan's heart completely surrendered at that moment, because this time, he realized something terrifying. He wished it too. After the charity dinner, something changed between Ethan Parker and Claire Bennett. Neither of them said it out loud. Neither of them admitted it. But the truth was impossible to ignore. What had started as a ridiculous joke was slowly becoming something real, and that terrified both of them. For the next few weeks, Ethan and Claire spent more time together than either of them planned. At first, it was innocent. Coffee, dates, phone calls, long walks through downtown Chicago, random conversations that lasted until midnight. But every day they grew closer, and every day it became harder to pretend they were just friends. One Saturday afternoon, Claire invited Ethan to a small coffee shop near the river. The place was quiet and cozy. Nothing like the expensive restaurants her family usually visited. Ethan arrived first. A few minutes later, Claire walked inside wearing simple jeans and a white sweater. No designer dress, no bodyguards, no luxury image, just Claire. And somehow she looked even more beautiful. Ethan smiled. "You know, normal clothes actually exist." Claire rolled her eyes playfully. "Very funny." She sat across from him. For a few seconds they simply smiled at each other. The kind of smile people share when they enjoy being together. The waitress brought their coffee. Then Claire leaned forward slightly. "I have a confession." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerous." Claire laughed. "It probably is." "Go ahead," she pointed toward his camera sitting beside him. "I've been stalking your photography page." Ethan pretended to look shocked. "You stalk me?" "Yes, I feel violated." Claire laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee, and once again, Ethan realized that hearing her laugh was becoming one of his favorite things. For the next hour, they talked about everything: dreams, childhood memories, embarrassing stories, future plans, and for the first time in years, Claire felt normal, not rich, not famous, not important, just happy. Later that evening, Claire surprised Ethan again. She visited his apartment. The moment she walked inside, she froze, then looked around slowly. The tiny living room, the old couch, the small kitchen, the stack of photography equipment. Finally, she smiled. "This is adorable." Ethan looked offended. "Excuse me," Claire laughed. "This apartment is smaller than my closet. Thank you for your support." She continued smiling, "But it feels comfortable." Ethan looked around. Comfortable was not the word he would have used. Still, knowing Claire liked being there made him strangely happy. They ordered pizza, watched an old comedy movie, and spent hours laughing together. For a little while, life felt perfect, but perfect moments never last forever. A few days later, Ethan noticed something he had ignored before. Every time Claire laughed, every time she smiled, there was still sadness hidden behind her eyes. Sadness she never talked about, a sadness she carried everywhere. One evening, they sat together near the Chicago River. Watching the sunset, the city lights slowly came alive around them. Cars moved through distant streets. Cold wind drifted across the water. Claire sat quietly beside him, lost in thought. Ethan finally decided to ask, "Can I tell you something?" Claire looked at him. "Of course. You pretend you're okay." Her smile disappeared instantly. Ethan continued, gently. "You laugh, you joke, you act strong. Then softer, but you're carrying something." Claire became silent. For a long moment, she simply stared at the water. Then she whispered, "You notice too much." Ethan smiled slightly. "Part of my job." The silence returned, this time heavier, more emotional. Finally, Claire took a deep breath and told him the truth. "My father is forcing me to marry Adrian." Ethan froze. "What?" Claire looked down. "He wants the business partnership, Claire. The wedding date hasn't been officially announced yet." Her voice trembled slightly, "But it's coming." Ethan felt anger rise inside him. "You said Adrian cheated on you." "He did. And your father still wants this marriage." Claire nodded. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "That makes no sense." Claire gave a sad laugh. "Welcome to my family." For several seconds, Ethan couldn't speak. The thought of Claire being trapped with Adrian made him sick. Then Claire quietly added, "And that's not the worst part." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Claire hesitated, as if she wasn't sure she should continue. Then finally she spoke. "My father knows about you." Ethan immediately felt tension. "What about me? He investigated you." The words hit like a punch. Ethan stared at her. "What?" Claire nodded sadly. "He knows where you live. He knows your financial situation. He knows your work history." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's insane." Claire looked guilty. "I know. What else?" She swallowed hard, then quietly answered. "He said, if I continue seeing you." Her voice cracked. "He'll make sure you never work in Chicago again." For a moment, Ethan couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The threat wasn't aimed at Claire. It was aimed at him, because her father knew exactly how to control her, by hurting the people she cared about. Ethan looked away. Toward the river. The city suddenly felt colder, much colder. Claire reached for his hand. "I'm sorry." Ethan shook his head. "You didn't do this, but it's because of me." "No." He looked directly into her eyes. "It's because your father thinks money gives him the right to control people." Claire's eyes filled with emotion. For the first time all evening, she looked close to tears. Then she whispered something Ethan never expected. "Maybe we should stop seeing each other." The words hit harder than they should have. Much harder. Ethan stared at her. "What?" Claire looked away. "If my father destroys your career because of me." She couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan suddenly understood. This wasn't what she wanted. This was fear talking. Fear of losing someone she cared about. Fear of causing pain. Fear of loving somebody. The realization made Ethan's chest ache before he could answer. His phone, vibrated. Unknown number. Ethan frowned, then ignored it. A few seconds later, another call arrived. Then another, and another. Claire looked confused. "Who is that?" "No idea." The calls stopped, but 10 minutes later, Ethan arrived home and discovered something worse. 2 men stood outside his apartment. Building waiting, neither looked friendly. One stepped forward. "Ethan Parker." Ethan immediately became cautious. "Who wants to know?" The man handed him a large envelope. "No message, just open it." Then both men walked away. Claire looked nervous. He slowly opened the envelope and immediately froze. Inside was a check. $100,000. Claire's face turned pale. "Oh no." Ethan stared at the amount, then looked at her. "Your father." Claire nodded, silently. The message was obvious. Take the money. Leave Claire alone. Disappear for several seconds. Ethan simply stared at the check. $100,000. Enough to solve nearly every financial problem in his life. Enough to pay rent. Enough to start over. Enough to change. Everything. Claire looked heartbroken. I'm so sorry. Ethan slowly looked down at the check again. Then, without warning, he ripped it in half. Claire blinked. Ethan ripped it again, and again, and again, until pieces of paper scattered across the floor. Claire stared at him in complete shock. Ethan's voice remained calm. I'm not for sale. The words hung in the air. Claire's eyes immediately filled with tears. Real tears. Not sadness, emotion. Relief. Because for the first time, someone had chosen her over money. Not her wealth, not her family name. Her. Without thinking, Claire stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Ethan froze, then slowly hugged her back. The world disappeared. No rich families, no threats, no business deals. Just the two of them, standing together, holding each other. Claire rested her head against his chest. I'm sorry, she whispered. You deserve better than all of this. Ethan gently lifted her chin. No, his voice softened. You deserve better. Their eyes locked. Neither moved. Neither looked away. The distance between them slowly disappeared. Closer and closer. Both knowing exactly what was happening. Both knowing there was no turning back. Then finally, their lips met, soft, gentle, real. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but somehow it changed everything. When they finally pulled apart, Claire's eyes shimmered with tears, and a nervous smile appeared on her face. I knew this would happen. Ethan smiled. What? Claire laughed softly through her tears. I knew I was going to fall in love with you. For one beautiful moment, Ethan forgot every problem in the world. Then he touched her cheek gently and whispered, too late. Claire looked at him. Ethan smiled. I already fell. First, Claire laughed, while tears rolled down her face, and for the first time in a very long time, she looked truly happy. But neither of them noticed the black luxury car parked across the street, hidden in the darkness. Watching, waiting, inside the car, sat Adrian, his hands clenched tightly around the steering wheel. His eyes burned with jealousy and rage, because he had just witnessed the one thing he feared most. Claire had fallen in love with someone else, and Adrian Collins was not the kind of man who accepted defeat. As the car slowly disappeared into the night, a dangerous plan was already forming inside his mind, and neither Ethan nor Claire had any idea that their biggest nightmare was about to begin. For the first time in months, Claire Bennett felt happy, not because of money, not because of success, not because of her powerful family. She was happy because of Ethan Parker, the man who had started as a ridiculous joke, the man who had accidentally called her his wife, the man who had torn apart $100,000 without hesitation because he refused to leave her, and most importantly, the man she loved. But happiness has a dangerous habit. Sometimes, it appears right before everything falls apart. 3 days after their first kiss, Ethan woke up feeling optimistic. For once, life seemed to be moving in the right direction. He had Claire. He had new photography projects lined up. And for the first time in years, he felt hopeful about the future. Unfortunately, that feeling didn't last long. That morning, Ethan arrived at a professional photography studio for an important interview. The company was famous across Chicago. Landing this job could completely change his career. He entered the building with confidence. The interview went perfectly. The manager seemed impressed. Everything looked promising. But 30 minutes later, the atmosphere changed. The manager suddenly became uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact, speaking carefully, almost nervously. Finally, he cleared his throat. Mr. Parker. Ethan immediately sensed trouble. Yes, the manager sighed. We've decided to move forward with another candidate. Ethan frowned. What changed? The manager looked away. I'm sorry. That answer told Ethan everything. Someone had interfered. Again, he left the building feeling frustrated, but he tried to stay positive. Maybe it was just bad luck. Unfortunately, the same thing happened again, and again, and again. Over the next 3 days, Ethan lost 4 more opportunities. Clients stopped calling. Meetings were canceled. People who once seemed interested suddenly disappeared. By the end of the week, the truth became impossible to ignore. Someone was destroying his career, and Ethan already knew who. Claire's father, the powerful businessman, had finally started keeping his promise. Stay away from Claire, or suffer the consequences. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his apartment staring at unpaid bills. The room felt smaller than usual. The future looked uncertain. For a brief moment, he considered walking away, not because he wanted to, but because he loved Claire. And if staying with her meant watching her family destroy both of their lives, maybe leaving would hurt less. His phone suddenly rang. Claire. Ethan smiled despite everything. But instead of hearing her cheerful voice, he heard crying. His heart stopped. Claire. No answer. Only soft sobbing. Ethan immediately stood up. Claire. What happened? Finally, she managed to speak. Please come. That was all she said, but it was enough. 20 minutes later, Ethan arrived at the Bennett mansion. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The house was chaotic. Servants rushed through hallways. Family members whispered nervously. Security guards stood near the entrance. The atmosphere felt tense, dangerous. Ethan spotted Claire's mother. For the first time, even she looked worried. Where's Claire? Ethan asked. She pointed upstairs without speaking. Ethan ran. His heart pounded harder with every step. When he reached Claire's room, the door was slightly open. Inside, Claire sat on the edge of her bed, crying. The sight broke his heart. Ethan quickly entered. Claire. She looked up. Her eyes were red. Her hands trembled. And Ethan felt immediate anger toward whoever caused this. He sat beside her. What happened? Claire handed him her phone. Ethan looked at the screen. Then his jaw tightened. Photos. Dozens of photos. Fake photos. Edited images. Showing Claire with different men during the time she was engaged to Adrian. Anyone looking at them would believe she had cheated. The internet was already spreading the story. Thousands of comments. Thousands of accusations. People calling her a liar, a cheater, a fraud. Ethan felt sick. This isn't real. Claire shook her head. I know who did this. Her silence gave him the answer. Adrian. Claire nodded. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. My father believes the scandal will destroy the family reputation. Ethan clenched his fists. And Claire looked away. He thinks the only solution is marrying Adrian immediately. For a moment, Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. This is insane, I know. No. Ethan stood up. This is beyond insane. Claire covered her face. He says people will forget the scandal if Adrian publicly forgives me. Ethan stared at her. Every part of this situation felt disgusting. A manipulative ex, creating a fake scandal. A father willing to sacrifice his daughter's happiness. A family choosing business over love. And Claire trapped in the middle. Ethan suddenly realized something. If nobody fought for her, she would lose. Not because she was weak, but because everyone around her was stronger, more powerful, more connected, more ruthless. The thought made something inside Ethan snap. He turned toward Claire. She looked exhausted, broken, hopeless. And in that moment, Ethan made the craziest decision of his life. Marry me instead. The room became silent. Claire slowly lowered her hands. But Ethan took a deep breath. His heart hammered inside his chest. But he didn't stop. Marry me. Claire stared at him, completely frozen. Ethan moved closer. I know I'm not rich. A nervous smile appeared. I know my apartment is tiny. Claire's eyes filled with tears again. I know your family thinks I'm a disaster. Now Ethan's voice became serious. But I love you. Silence. Heavy silence. Claire looked like she had forgotten how to breathe. Ethan continued. I don't care about your money. I don't care about your last name. I don't care about business deals. His eyes locked onto hers. I care about you. Claire's lips trembled, and suddenly tears began falling again. But these tears were different. Not sadness. Hope. Before she could answer, another voice interrupted. A cold voice. Absolutely not. Claire's father stood in the doorway. His expression was dark, furious, dangerous. The atmosphere instantly changed. Ethan slowly stood. The older man stepped into the room. You've caused enough problems already. Ethan remained calm. "With respect, sir, I'm asking for your daughter's hand." Claire's father laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You can barely support yourself." Ethan said nothing. "You have no influence. Nothing. No power. Still nothing." Finally, the businessman stepped closer. "You have absolutely nothing to offer her." For a second, Ethan felt doubt. Maybe he was right. Maybe he really had nothing. No fortune, no mansion, no powerful connections. But then Ethan looked at Claire, and suddenly he realized something important. Love wasn't nothing. Loyalty wasn't nothing. The willingness to fight for someone wasn't nothing. So, Ethan straightened his shoulders and answered calmly, "I can offer her a choice." The room fell silent. Claire's father looked stunned. For years, people had treated Claire like property, an investment, a business opportunity. But Ethan saw her as a person, a woman capable of making her own decisions. Then something unexpected happened. Claire stood up slowly, confidently. She walked toward Ethan and grabbed his hand. The simple action shocked everyone, including her father. Claire looked directly at him. "I choose Ethan." The words echoed through the room. Her father's face hardened. "You understand what that means?" Claire nodded. "If you walk away with him tonight," his voice became cold, "you are no longer part of this family." The threat hung heavily in the air. Millions of dollars. Luxury, inheritance, security, everything. Gone. All Claire had to do was let go of Ethan's hand. Instead, she held it tighter, then looked directly into her father's eyes. Ethan whispered the words he never expected to hear. "I'd rather lose money than lose the man I love." Silence. Pure silence. Even Ethan felt emotional, because he knew how much this cost her. Not financially, emotionally. She was walking away from the only life she had ever known. For him, for them, for love. A few minutes later, they left the mansion together. No celebration, no approval, no blessing. Just two people choosing each other. The night air felt cold, but neither cared. As they walked toward Ethan's car, Claire leaned against him. For the first time all day, she looked peaceful. Then, suddenly, "Well, isn't this romantic?" A familiar voice cut through the darkness. Both turned around. Adrian, standing near the driveway, smiling. But there was something wrong with that smile. Something dangerous. Something calculated. Ethan immediately stepped in front of Claire. "What do you want?" Adrian laughed. "You really think this story has a happy ending?" Claire frowned. "What are you talking about?" Adrian slowly lifted a folder. A thick folder, filled with documents. His smile grew wider. "You should see what I found." Claire's expression changed instantly. Ethan felt tension rising. "What's in the folder?" Adrian looked directly at Claire, then handed it to her. "Proof." Claire opened it. Her eyes scanned the pages. Then, suddenly, her face turned completely white. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Claire." She looked up slowly. Shock covered her face. Disbelief, confusion, and something else. Something Ethan couldn't understand. Then, she whispered, "No way." And at that exact moment, Ethan realized their nightmare was far from over. In fact, it was only beginning. The night air felt colder than ever. Claire Bennett stood frozen beside Ethan's car, staring at the documents Adrian had just handed her. Her hands trembled. Her face had turned completely pale, and for the first time since Ethan had met her, she looked genuinely shocked. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "Claire." His voice was calm, but inside, he was worried. "What is it?" Claire didn't answer immediately. Her eyes continued, moving across the pages. Then, slowly, very slowly, she looked up at Ethan. The expression on her face confused him. She didn't look angry. She didn't look hurt. She looked surprised, completely surprised. "Ethan," she whispered. "What?" Claire held up the documents. "These papers say you inherited shares in Sterling Media Group." Ethan blinked. "What?" Adrian folded his arms proudly. A cruel smile stretched across his face. "Looks like your boyfriend forgot to tell you he's secretly rich." Ethan stared at him, then at the papers, then back at Claire. None of it made sense. "What are you talking about?" Claire handed him the documents. Ethan quickly scanned the pages. Legal records, corporate ownership reports, inheritance, paperwork. And then he saw a familiar name. His grandfather. Suddenly, Old memories rushed back. Years ago, after his grandfather passed away, lawyers had contacted Ethan about business investments and company shares. At the time, Ethan had ignored most of it. He was young, confused, and honestly uninterested. He wanted to build his own life, not depend on inherited money. Over the years, he had completely forgotten about it. Now, those forgotten documents stood in front of him, and according to the paperwork, the shares were worth millions. Ethan looked up slowly. "You have got to be kidding me." Adrian's smile disappeared slightly. That wasn't the reaction he expected. Claire stared at Ethan. "You really didn't know?" Ethan laughed nervously. "I swear I didn't." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then suddenly, Claire started laughing. At first, it was a small laugh. Then, another, and another. Soon she was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Ethan stared at her. "Why are you laughing?" Claire wiped tears from her eyes. "Because this is exactly something that would happen to you." Even Ethan started laughing. The situation was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. All this time, he had been struggling financially while secretly owning part of a major company. Adrian, however, looked furious. His plan was clearly falling apart. "You were supposed to be embarrassed," Adrian snapped. Ethan looked at him. "Sorry to disappoint you." Adrian clenched his jaw. Then Claire's smile slowly faded. A realization appeared in her eyes. She looked directly at Adrian. "You investigated Ethan." Adrian remained silent. Claire took a step forward. "You searched through his entire life, hoping to find something you could use against him." Still silence. Then Claire's eyes narrowed, and suddenly she understood everything. The fake scandal, the lies, the manipulation, the threat, all of it. "You did this because you were jealous." Adrian's expression darkened. "You were supposed to marry me." Claire shook her head. "No." Her voice became stronger. "I was supposed to choose for myself." For the first time, Adrian looked nervous, because he realized something important. He no longer controlled the situation, and without control, he had nothing. Then, another voice suddenly echoed through the driveway. "Adrian Collins." Everyone turned. Several police cars had entered the property. Red and blue lights flashed across the night. Police officers stepped out, and behind them stood Claire's father. His face was cold, serious, determined. Adrian's confidence vanished instantly. "What is this?" he demanded. Claire's father slowly approached, then stopped, directly in front of him. "For months, I ignored the warning signs." Adrian looked confused. "What are you talking about?" The older man's eyes hardened. "Your financial records." Adrian's face changed. Immediately, Claire noticed. Ethan noticed. Everyone noticed. And suddenly the truth became obvious. Claire's father continued. "My investigators discovered several fraudulent accounts connected to your companies." Adrian stepped backward. "You can't prove anything." "Actually," Claire's father replied calmly, "we can." The police officers moved forward. Adrian's confidence completely collapsed. "You set me up." "No," Claire answered quietly. "You destroyed yourself." For a moment, nobody moved. Then, officers placed Adrian in handcuffs. The former businessman looked around desperately. At Claire, at Ethan, at her father. But nobody came to save him, because for the first time, there was nobody left to manipulate, nobody left to control. As police escorted Adrian away, he turned one final time. His eyes locked onto Claire. "You'll regret this." Claire simply looked back, calm, strong, free. "No," she said softly, "I won't." The police car doors closed. Moments later, the vehicles disappeared into the night. And just like that, Adrian Collins was gone. The nightmare was finally over, or so they thought, because another difficult conversation still remained. Claire slowly turned toward her father, the man who had spent months trying to separate her from Ethan, the man who had treated her future like a business contract. For several uncomfortable seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, her father broke the silence. "I owe both of you an apology." Claire looked surprised. Ethan certainly was. The billionaire businessman sighed heavily. For the first time, he looked older, tired, human. "I spent so much time protecting my company that I forgot how to protect my daughter." Claire's eyes softened slightly. Her father continued, I judged Ethan before I ever knew him. Then he looked directly at Ethan. I saw your bank account. His expression became ashamed. But I never looked at your character. Ethan remained silent. The older man extended his hand. I was wrong. For a second, Ethan considered everything that had happened. The threats, the interference, the pressure. Then he looked at Claire. She loved this man. Despite everything, he was still her father. Slowly, Ethan accepted the handshake, and just like that, years of conflict began to disappear. Not instantly, not perfectly, but enough for healing to begin. Weeks passed. Chicago became obsessed with the story. News outlets covered every detail. The billionaire heiress, the struggling photographer, the corrupt businessman, the shocking inheritance. People loved it. Some called it a fairy tale. Others called it unbelievable. But Ethan and Claire ignored the headlines. Because for the first time, they were simply enjoying life, real life, together. One evening, several months later, Ethan invited Claire somewhere special. When she arrived, she immediately recognized the location, the Grand Bell Hotel, the exact place where everything began. The same ballroom, the same chandelier, the same elegant windows overlooking the city. Claire smiled. You brought me back here. Ethan nodded. Seemed appropriate. The ballroom was empty, quiet, peaceful. Nothing like the crowded engagement party from months earlier. They slowly walked across the polished floor, remembering, laughing, reliving old memories. Finally, Claire stopped near the giant windows. City lights sparkled, outside beautiful, almost magical. She turned toward Ethan. You know. A playful smile appeared. You ruined my life that night. Ethan laughed. Best accident ever. Claire smiled. I suppose you're right. For a moment, they simply stood together. Comfortable silence, the kind shared only by people deeply in love. Then, Ethan took a deep breath. Claire immediately noticed. What? Ethan smiled nervously. Well, he reached into his pocket. Claire's eyes widened. No way. Ethan slowly pulled out a small ring box. Suddenly, his heart was racing. The same way it had raced the first time he saw her. The same way it raced every time she smiled. Every time she laughed. Every time she whispered his name. He opened the box. The diamonds sparkled beneath the ballroom lights. Claire covered her mouth. Instant tears filled her eyes. Ethan. He stepped closer, then softly said, Do you remember the first thing I ever told you? Claire laughed through her tears. She's my wife. Ethan nodded. Exactly. Then he got down on one knee. The room felt silent. Perfectly silent. Only two heartbeats existed. His and hers. Ethan looked up at the woman who had completely changed his life. The woman who had taught him that love mattered more than status, more than money, more than fear. Then, he smiled. Claire Bennett. His voice trembled slightly. Will you stop being my fake wife? A tear rolled down Claire's cheek, and Ethan continued, and become my real one. For a second, she couldn't speak. She was crying too hard, laughing too hard, feeling too much. Finally, she nodded. Then again, and again. Yes, another tear. Yes. A smile. Yes. Then louder, 1,000 times yes. Ethan stood up. Claire immediately threw her arms around him. They laughed. They cried. And then they kissed. Not like strangers. Not like friends. Not like two people pretending, but like two people who had fought through every obstacle imaginable and finally reached the ending they deserved. When they finally pulled apart, Claire rested her forehead against his. A beautiful smile appeared. Then, she whispered the words that had started everything. The same words she had spoken on the night they first met. I wish that were true. Ethan smiled, then gently touched her cheek. It is true now. And as the city lights glowed beyond the ballroom windows, the joke that had changed everything finally became reality. The end.